Hello everybody, recently we saw Raynor become the world champion, and a laser claimed this was the best early game Zerg vs Terran I've ever seen. Is it though? Is it really a laser, or are you just pumping up your friend because you think he's pretty good at StarCraft? Bloody brown noser just wants to get some of his build orders. No, for real though, seriously, Raynor had some of the most disgusting early games I've ever seen, because I have never seen one Zerg get so far ahead almost every game against every Terran. By the 7-8 minute mark, the games were almost over. It was insane that people even took maps off him, and it was usually because he didn't know how to deal with their late game. So we're going to start looking at a game here of Raynor versus Dream, and let's mute the audio and give you guys a little 8 times, and I don't even want you to look at the screen so much as the mini-map. Watch the creep spread, and we can kind of catch some Banshees getting deflected, but watch the bloody map. Look at the creep spread. He is defending Hellion Banshee multi-prong. He's defending Marines, and look at the map. The creep never stops. He's got a big old protuberance on the right side of the map that never stops growing. Every time a bit gets snipped off, he replaces it. His creep, 8 minutes 30, and it's almost on Dream's third base. And this is the sort of shit that he kept doing over and over again. So let's tell you guys exactly what the key ingredient is, which completely revolutionized his openings and made it so he was consistently getting in an insanely good position. He practiced Archon mode against 4 players at once. Raynor practiced against multiple pro gamers controlling one Terran. He mentioned in his interview with Harstam that a laser had a single Viking that would never die and would just poke around picking off overlords, and he could never kill it with his queens because it was always being watched. He said, dude, when you're dealing with a guy who has a Liberator and one pro gamer is controlling that Liberator the entire time, holy shit, that Liberator just keeps moving. The Spore Crawler will never clean it up. And Raynor said, look, I realized that when I was playing against just ridiculous levels of control, preparing for Maru, preparing for Dream and these best Terrans in the world, I needed to make it so that I made the situation harder than it would be in the actual circumstances, so that I was taking the extra precautions. And what Raynor discovered is he needed to split his queens into 2 groups. There was just no way. Normally, against the single Terrans, APM constraints, how much they can multitask, you can have your queens in one spot and you'll be fine. But against the best players in the world, or 4 or 2 pro gamers controlling one Terran, he did both of those in practice a few different times. He said, look, we've got to adjust our control groups. And while his hatcheries go on 1, his main army goes on 2, his main defense squad is on 3, his secondary defense squad of queens is on 4. And if there was ever a big push on the front, he'd quickly throw number 4 into number 3 and just make it one big queen group at the front. But the moment it looked like the Terran might be hitting multiple angles, he would split them back up and he'd cover multiple areas. Now in this game, he actually spotted that it was a really quick third command center from Dream, so there was only light pressure. He saved no transfuse energy early, and he just spreads creep in every single direction like mad. And right even from the very beginning, this has really big payoffs. About 4 minutes, the first 2 Hellions come across the map, and the Reaper, and they normally can slow down your creep a little. Even if your queens are up here defending the creep, you can't spread it over here, or you'll dart in and snipe it. But even here, 2 queens on 1 control group defend the left. They defend this tumor and this tumor, and the other queen goes to the right side to defend this tumor. Raynor also has the traditional Ring of Overlords. Does he lose a tumor here or there? Yes, but it's costing Reapers and it's costing Hellion damage. He's got the Overlords there. That tumor was a bit greedy for Raynor. He does lose it as well, but he just keeps spreading it. But notice the Overlords will see where those Hellions are coming from. He can move these 2 squads, and if air harassment comes in, he can split to deal with the Hellions on one side with some queens, the air units on the other. He is already pre-split. Anytime a Liberator, a Mind Drop, a Banshee comes in, he is already ready to shut it down, and this just gives him an easy early game. So we're going to look at a bunch of his games versus Maru as well, where he shuts a whole bunch of different openings down. He delays his creep for a moment there as those Hellions drive in. As they drive away, he spreads the tumors. Does he lose a tumor here or there? Yes. But at the same time, he's spreading on every single angle. And he does such a good job of, as soon as the cooldown's ready, usually within 5 or 10 seconds, he will spread it. Now you might think that's not that impressive, 5 seconds of inefficiency on a tumor. I guarantee you, even at this level of play, only being 5 or 10 seconds while defending Hellions, while expanding, while macroing flawlessly, it's insane. He keeps his creep up, and even when he's microing on one side, he is always spreading on the other side. So any delay in one area always is counteracted by how quick he is to spread elsewhere. Check this out. Banshees come in, Raynor is already spreading his units. Where are his queens on the right? So, sorry, we're on the wrong player's hotkeys. 3 queens are in the natural. He didn't know where the Banshee was coming, So he's got 3 queens here, and the other queens are up the front. Now that he sees the Banshees, check it out. These queens from the natural move up to the high ground. Those queens stay on the low ground. How often have we seen players in this scenario grab all their queens, A-move them up, the Banshees come back in, kill 3 drones. The queens try to A-move all the way back down, and you see this movement. I'm making that sound because that's the sound I make when I do it. And I watch the replay and I go, you idiots, spread your queens out, split them up. It's really easy to not do that stupid maneuver of A-moving your queens back and forwards like that if you just split them ahead of time. The number of times I've lost so many units just because I keep my queens in one stupid blob rather than spreading them out. But Raynor is always pre-split, and he puts roughly even numbers. Sometimes he'll adjust it. Oh, it's just one Liberator in the back. He might only put 2 queens on the key in the main defending the Liberator, and all the queens are on the front defending the Hellbats or the Hellions. So he'll be very flexible with how he adapts it, but on a core base level, it's against any Hellion play, I am just going to split my queens into 2 even squads. These are separate from his injecting queens. Raynor injects like most pro gamers do. He jumps to his main with a camera location, boxes the queen, doesn't inject. Camera location, boxes the queen, doesn't inject. Third base, boxes the queen, doesn't inject. People often don't realize that's what pros are doing because they do it so goddamned fast. Now you'll notice at this point, he's put all of his queens back on 1 key. Check it out. He's got 3 queens over there on 5. So I think those are his 3. Maybe he doesn't box his queens. Those are actually injecting queens. Let's check that. How often does he... Okay, so he does actually control group his injecting queens. Early on, he doesn't have set injecting queens, but once they all pop out, he's going to put those on number 5 as well. So you see here, 7 queens on number 3, because he says, okay, we're at the point where I've defended the harassment. The next thing I have to worry about is a big bunch of Stim Marines and Medevacs coming. So I want all my queens together to shoot down that Medevac, and we'll take it out. Yeah. He still uses camera locations, though. I don't know if Raynor uses a backspace injecting method. I hope not, because it's fucking terrible. I'm pretty sure he doesn't. I think he just uses camera locations. He might use spacebar to jump between the bases, but essentially it's some sort of manual injecting. None of this shift spam or rapid fire business, I don't think. Okay, cool. So Raynor's got literally a penis of creep on the right side of the map. Very nice. They call him the Italian Stallion for a reason. He's a grower, not a shower. And, well, actually a grower and a shower, I guess I should say. Anyways, my point is he's big. Yeah. He's won the game at this point. It's game over. Not really. But honestly, check this out. Raynor, because his creep and his early defense is so good, even though he'll build a round of Zerglings and Banelings around the time that first Marine drop comes, he's already always got 3 bases up, and he often even has built 10 drones for his 4th base, gets his Ling Bane out, and then as soon as he feels like he's comfortable defending the first Marine drop, which sometimes he'll start droning even before this comes in. See, he's already started it, and he wants to fully saturate that 4th and take a 5th base. He could also add a macro hatch behind this, but he's more focused on getting the 4th and the 5th. So just in case the Terran surprises him with a really hard push, he always has the option of giving up 1 hatchery and moving the drones to the other side. From here, it's basically just traditional Zerg versus Terran, and his queens are all in one group, but notice he follows the same way you are meant to play Zergling Baneling. This is something Cyril kind of messed up a little bit early on in his series against Clem. He kept all his Ling Bane in one group. Once you get to this stage of the... And don't get me wrong, Clem was in his face, so it didn't give him much of a chance to spread. Raynor is always splitting his army in 2. This is the flexible setup that you want as a Zerg. 1 army is on the left, 1 army on the right. 1 army on the top, 1 on the bottom, depending on which orientation the map is. Now this side over here, right, wherever the Terran pushes, that side of your army pulls back. This is the reflexive nature of Zerg. You want to pull back, step back, and you want to either sandwich with the other side or send that in to bust their 3rd base. And you can very flexibly go between. So what you can do as Raynor here is you can threaten the run by, and if they're defended, you can pull that back, come in from this angle, and sandwich their army. Either way, you are pre-setting up to either get a full surround or to be counter-attacking and taking the fight elsewhere so the Terran can't concentrate all their units on the front. It's beautiful. Does a bit of a run by a few times. And at this stage of the game, we've got creep on the 3rd base of the Terran. He's got over 80 workers with a 5th base up. He's got a ridiculously sized army, even though his upgrades are just a little behind. It is so hard. And if the Terran pushes on the creep, they're going to get annihilated by Banelings. Fast forward, and that's exactly what happens. So here we see a game where Raynor basically just scouted there was no Hellions, and you can see from even well before this push arrives, he just changes the formation. He doesn't need to split his queens. He still gets some good creep out. But what you're going to notice in this game is Raynor doesn't go as ham on the creep spread. Why? Because he knows there's a big push coming, and he knows he needs transfuse. So let's count the active tumors. I think maybe he lost one there. I'm not sure, but he's got 1, 2, 3, 4. Only 4 active tumors, whereas by this point in the previous game, he went for like 10. And that is because he knows a push is coming, and he knows he needs his queens to be more of a strong defensive force. So how many queens have we got up front? 8. 1 transfuse, 2 transfuse, 3 transfuse, 4 transfuse, 4 transfuses to help with his spine crawl and his queens to defend this push. This is awesome. So what he's going to do is he's going to defend this attack, shuts it down with the queens up front, and only once he gets a little bit more control over the map and he's already defended the first wave and he's got more excess energy, will Raynor say, okay, we can dump a bit more energy into spreading this creep out a bit further, put a few tumors down everywhere, and then explode into the creep. So there is a bit of a conscious decision making that happens with Raynor when he's up against a very economic build that's just using a few Hellions to poke around the edge of the creep. Then he's actually doing a really powerful job of just spreading creep instantly. But when he has to really respect a big push, you're going to see he's a little lighter on the creep tumors, a little bit more focused on surviving and defending, and just adding the tumors as he needs them without depleting that big bank of transfuse energy, which is so integral to defending. Let's look at another game. All right, so taking a look here at Pillars of Gold versus Maru, we see Maru coming in with a 6 Marine drop and a Widow Mine, 3 Hellions on the right, and we see once again Raynor looking awesome with his queen split. So he's got 2 queens down here on the right, 2 queens up in the main. This is a really early pressure. He does not have a lot of other units out. No queen at the third, a queen's just popped at the natural, and he's basically split up really well though, where he's going to try and push back these Hellions on the right. We'll slow this right down. Queens try to click on the medevac. Zerglings run on up here. And it's just having those queens already pre-split. Maru doesn't even try to run past with these Hellions because he's already taking damage. Running past, he's going to take more damage, and he doesn't know if there's Zerglings behind that. So just this ability to always be on the edges of the creep, intercepting the pressure as soon as it comes in. You can see that Raynor does a great job of shutting this down. Takes a Widow Mine shot there. The queens clean that up. This drop comes in, takes heavy damage, and really doesn't achieve anything. And look at the way Raynor adapts and adjusts. So this drop comes down here. The situation kind of changes the angle that's happening. But look at the control groups and look at what's happening. So these 2 queens come up here. This queen pulls back, gets transfused, and you can see he just added her into control group 3. So these 3 queens are on the low ground, and the other 2 queens hanging up on the high ground. He does even bring the queen up from the natural, funnily enough, but always maintaining that queen split, never panicking and bringing them all together. And this allows him to absorb that pressure, and he's already massively saturated, and he just gets ahead from there. So let's fast forward a little bit in this game and look at the next bit of interaction. As the Hellions can't really find anything, but we're going to see an 8 Marine drop on the left, 2 Banshees on the right, and Hellions over here. So let's take a look at how Raynor has split up. He's got queens down here in the natural, looking awesome. He's got queens up here on the left side as well, respreading creep there, and his Zerglings hanging out in the middle. Not only that, whenever he's up against Banshees, which, yes, he happened to scout fantastically, he always makes 2 Overseers. In this game, he's actually only made 1 and put it on this group because he saw the Banshees coming with his great creep spread. But if he's ever unsure, he'll make a 2nd Overseer and add it to this squad as well, just to make sure he can completely shut down those Banshees wherever they go. So the Banshees are pushed back, the Marine drop comes in, Lings and the Queens respond over there, and you can see just having those queens split, Maru has no freedom to find any purchase on this map. Nowhere can he really achieve anything. And it just feels like, even with the creep so far out, Raynor already has absolute map dominance, and he gets so far ahead. Look at this economy. It's actually just unfair. It's so well done here by Raynor. And let's see, at some point here, now that we're at the Marine stage, will he split his queens back into one group to fight? For now, it feels like he's still spreading. He's got... Okay, now he overrides the queen key. And he actually screws it up because these queens lose their control group. Raynor Uh-oh, Raynor made a mistake there. So we do see one little mistake at this point. So Raynor has said, hey, time to split my Ling Bane into 2 armies, which is a really good move, but he actually overrides these 3 queens on the right side and doesn't put them in a new control group straight away. So what he should have done first was put those onto number 3, I believe, so that he's still got that group. Or does he shuffle them down, actually? Let's take a look, because he's got 4 queens that have become injecting queens. 1, 2, 3, 4. So he's taken those off creep duty and he's moved those into injecting duty, but then he's got a lot of queens. He's got 3 over there and 2 over here. So 5 plus 4, 9 queens. Yeah. So let's take a look. And then he overrides the key. So he doesn't have any queen control group anymore, which is real sloppy because he should always have the queens on number 3. He's not using that key. That's his normal setup. So he accidentally moves his queens forward there. This is a real sloppy, weird situation. Is he manually intending? No. Finally, Raynor fixes it and does put all of his queens on number 3 and combine them. At this stage of the game, he doesn't need to spread them out anymore because anything the Terran's pressuring with is going to involve a pack of Stim Marines. Queens can no longer defend that on their own anyway, so he's going to be trying to split those queens up, or no longer split them up, but combine them into one group so that they can engage on the front. Let's ignore the terrible engagement that Raynor's about to take, and let's look at one more example of this opening. So this game's really cool because Raynor has seen that there is actually Banshees on the way. So you're going to see he's got that queen spread. He's got queens with an overseer here. He's got 2 queens with an overseer there, heading up towards the main base. But watch Raynor's camera here. So watch from his camera. We're on regular actual game speed as it's being played. And he sees the push on the front. The moment he sees the Banshees, he already adds those 2 queens to his control group and has already brought them down here. He's done that using his groups. They're already on their way. Transfuse, so he instantly consolidates his army whenever there's a frontal push. Now let's fast forward a little bit. As soon as he started defending, he'd already split these 2 queens off to the side. The Banshees try to rotate, but as soon as he defended the push, he'd already split. How sick was that? Let's watch that again. So he's bringing these queens down, but because he's defended the push so bloody well. So look at this. Because the Banelings have already shut it. These queens are on the control group. Doop-de-doop. But then as soon as he holds it, he grabs those queens. And the Overseer sends them off to the left. Because he knows, let's spread the creep. Make sure this keeps spreading as well as intercept the Banshees if they rotate. And the other queens are on the other side. So he redoes his queen control groups there. Shuts down the Banshee rotate. And he says, the moment you don't have anything that's actually scary, I will spread my queens out and just cover the map and creep. And once again, Raynor finds himself with an incredible lead, smashing the early game. So what can the Terrans do better in these games? Well, I think it's interesting because this was such a weird, special mind game build from Maru that was trying to kind of trick Raynor, but Raynor opened Overlord speed. I think what we kind of realize is that maybe the Terrans need to have something that can actually contest the queens a little more or snipe those tumors a little more actively. My man. Whenever I fight a Zerg who builds this many queens this consistently and defends well with them, it feels unfair. If they're just a little bit better than me mechanically, it feels unfair, and I am very bad at dealing with it. So I would need to speak to an expert Terran to really talk about the tiny details of what they need to do better. I honestly haven't seen a Zerg at pro level defend with such good queen splits, such heavy queen for such a long time. Generally speaking, queens don't do well at dealing with tank pushes, right? If you could get a fast tank push in a good enough position, heavy queen, not always the best against that. Maybe there's an argument for some sort of heavy Hellbat attack with Stim Marines, but like heavy, or some sort of just straight, 5 racks push bio tank off 2 base where you completely skip the early aggression. What we were definitely seeing is that Raynor was able to handle these pressures just a bit too well. And maybe it's slight execution edges. Maybe it's tiny little things here and there. But these sort of made-up push timings that were meant to surprise and scare against Raynor's Overlord speed was not a good move. In this game, Maru should have disengaged. He saw Banelings. There is no reason for him to be out here. This was really bad control by Maru. to just run forward into the Baneling Queen makes no sense. Not when you've seen Banelings more. You don't have any real ranged firepower. If you're going to try and do that, you would need to use the Banshees to try and snipe the Banelings and the Marines and pull the Hellbats back a little and then re-engage. But I think he should have just rotated around and threatened with this army and tried to deny a fourth base. Try to create some follow-up pressure while macroing hard behind it. Okay, guys, so closing thoughts. Raynor splitting his queens up, being really organized, having his Overlord spotters out for vision. Incredible. His defense was really good. His scouting with his Overlord speed, his slow Overlords, and Zerglings trying to run in the base meant he almost always knew what was coming before it came. So he was always preemptively split up or combined, depending on what the situation called for. When the Terrans swapped from multi-prong aggression to a single push, he'd very quickly reorganize those queens. So really good flexible queen usage from Raynor. I think the big question I have here is what happens if we see a more traditional build order? We saw Hellion openings, but they were always delayed Hellions off a third command center, or Hellions being added on top of a 2-Rax build to morph Hellbats, or a couple of Hellbats coming out after reactive Marines and Banshees. We never saw a traditional Hellion opening. What do I mean by that? I mean Barracks Gas, Reaper, Hellions, go, go, go. Or Marine, maybe you skip the Reaper, but then you get the factory faster, and you go 2 Hellions, 2 Hellions, 2 Hellions, and you delay the third command center a little bit. Those older style builds, Terrans aren't doing those at the moment because they feel they don't have enough oomph. They'd rather get the third command center up. But I think what we saw here is Raynor taking advantage of Terrans skipping the Hellion aggression, not keeping the momentum up. If you don't get your Hellions across the map on time with either a gas first or a Barracks Gas straight into Hellion production, if you delay them even 20 seconds to squeeze that third command center in, if you want to go for some cute reacted Barracks Marine drop, it doesn't have the same inherent flexibility as Hellions. There is a reason why for years non-stop Hellion production has been the norm in Legacy of the Void. And Raynor here is showing why these more modern builds are abused by a player who builds a lot of queens and spreads those queens out and spreads that creep non-stop. Raynor made at least 8 queens, often 10 queens in many of these games, split them in 2 groups, and as long as he was always in position, which he was very good at doing, it seemed like these builds just were not able to interact for extended periods with the queens. There was no point in the early game where the Hellions and the Reaper outnumbered the queens enough to say, hey, there's 1 queen on its own or 2 queens. Let's jump on that, bounce it with a grenade and kill it. Let's scan and clear all these tumors. Instead, we were seeing a Raynor who could have like 1/4 or 1/3 of his queens in a location, and the Hellions were like, we can't even take this fight. So I think what we really want to see from my side, because I don't know how it would play out, is, well, what if Maru just built Hellions nonstop? What if someone went gas first and hit with hard, consistent Hellion aggression? Does this take some of the power away from the fact that Raynor's overbuilding queens and not able to get creep spread out? Does he still get his creep spread really far out? I don't know. The pro gamers are going to have to show us what happens. I'm sure the Terrans are going to adjust. But looking at how Raynor looked against all of the openings in this tournament, people need to think it through and they need to come to different conclusions. They either need to reach a new level of execution or they need to change it up. And I think changing the openings up is the right call because Raynor looked way too comfortable in these games and this just did not look like a good situation. I don't think I could find a single game in this tournament where Terran was even by the 8-minute mark. They felt like they were almost always behind. And even though Raynor lost maps, it was due to late game mistakes he made. His early game was immaculate. Well, that about sums up my thoughts for now. As always, we're still learning. We're trying to figure the game out as we go. It's incredibly complicated. I am not the encyclopedia of StarCraft, and I can't wait to see what happens, especially when we see Clem fighting Raynor in the next few tournaments, both on the EU server with no lag, and him being as bloody good as he is right now. I want as many Clem versus Raynor matches as possible because Clem is a beast, and I think if someone's going to figure it out, it's going to be him. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next video. Goodbye and good night.